Welcome back to the No Bullshit Guide to Java Spring Boot. Today we cover dependency injection. First we have to talk about how Spring Boot starts up in the Spring container. So on startup, Spring runs around scanning for annotations like @service, @REST-controller, @bean, or @component. Each component is then instantiated and kept in memory. And I mean Java instantiation. So getProductService is equal to new getProductService, for example. Each component is then put in the Spring container as a bean. The Spring container is just a box that holds all of your objects. Once the object is in the Spring container, we can use it across the application through dependency injection. So here's our example. We have a cat-fat controller with constructor injection. This constructor reaches up into the Spring container to get the service class. So if we open up the cat-fat service, we can see it is annotated with @service. We can see this working by temporarily removing the @service annotation and then trying to boot up our project. We get an error creating the bean. Spring Boot was looking for the cat-fat service in the Spring container but couldn't find it. Theoretically, if we didn't want to use dependency injection, this is how we would do it. Remove it from the constructor, and then use the new keyword, new cat-fat service. Now this won't technically compile because the cat-fat service constructor is also relying on something, but you get my point. Dependency injection means we don't have to use the new keyword and Spring manages the instantiation of objects. So why should you use dependency injection? There's a lot of reasons, but two of them are you only want one instance of your object. This is called a singleton. This means it's more memory and CPU efficient. Instead of having 20 or 30 instances of the cat-fat service, there's only one. Also, it allows you to set up your object properties once and then set it for the entire app. There is a distinct difference between bean and component. @bean must create a new instance, then Spring puts it in the container. So if you notice, we did have to use the new keyword when we create a bean, and then return it. Whatever the return value is, that's what Spring puts in the container. A component, on the other hand, doesn't require a new instance. Spring automatically puts it in the container. And this might be confusing with this example because this interface is @repository, not @component. Well, if you hover and then command click on Mac or control click on Windows, you can see that repository is actually an amalgamation of many different annotations, including @component. So this technically is a component. Another example is @REST-controller. It has the annotation controller, and then controller has the annotation @component. And lastly, you might hear something called IOC or inversion of control. Essentially, we're inverting the control of instantiating objects. So instead of us doing it, we're giving that responsibility to Spring. And technically speaking, all it means is we don't use the new keyword. That's the basics of dependency injection. Please like and subscribe.